So a little background. So the camera we're going to talk about is something called the Views camera. But before we get to the Views camera, I'm going to talk about a company called Humanize. Now, Humanize Technologies has been in business for about 16 years, holds about 70 patents in 3D imaging, 3D modeling, and 3D printing. And their biggest claim to fame is lenticular lens printing. So a lot of the patents that they have is in lenticular lens printing. So all of the bookmarks and all that kind of stuff. So as a company, Humanize has been for many years making computer modeled stereographic 360 content, either for a two-dimensional screen or now for virtual reality or for printing. Because they had all of the expertise in the software and were watching what was happening in the imaging industry and the whole virtual reality space, they decided what they really needed to do was create a camera in order to feed their software. Because today, if you want to make 3D 360 content, you're buying about somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000 worth of equipment, a whole bunch of GoPros, a whole bunch of memory cards, software to try to stitch it all together. And the people who are doing everything outside of this camera will tell you that it takes about 1 day to render 1 minute worth of video. Yeah. It's crazy, right? Because they have to shoot it, then they have to take all the cards out, then they have to put it, right? There's just a lot of work involved. What Humanize is doing is we're actually making the creation of 3D 360 content within the reach of everybody. So I'm going to first start by saying it's an $800 camera. So I'm not going to save the creamy center until the end. But this is the camera itself. This is called the Views camera, made by Humanize. The camera is designed with 8 lenses on it, right? All the way around in your circle. And each one of those cameras is a full HD, 19 by 20 by 1080 resolution, progressive scan image. What we do is the camera is a shoot and store device. So in the side over here, there is a little memory card, micro SD slot. And in the micro SD slot, we put the card and we record from the camera directly to that card. Now we are creating a tremendous amount of data. The camera is capturing about 1 gigabyte worth of data for every 1 minute of recording.
Well, how big is that card?
So 64 gigabyte is going to get you about an hour worth of recording, right? So we heard earlier today how much processing power it takes to actually render out all of the videos that we saw earlier and all of the work going up to server farms and everything else. We said there is no way that we're going to lead to the mass adoption of virtual reality content if it requires that type of horsepower. So again, going back to what Humanize does extremely well is the software side of things. And because we are providing, I guess, a complete end-to-end solution in the virtual reality space, because we know how that camera is manufactured, we can shorten that entire processing and that rendering piece on the back end. And basically the way we do it is this. Once the camera is manufactured, it goes into a control room. In that control room, we take a series of pictures and videos. We analyze that. We make a control file. Think of it as the fingerprint for that camera. After it's manufactured, we know where every sensor is, every lens property, any chromatic aberrations, all of those types of things, and we record that into the firmware of the camera so that it becomes a data file. Then when we transfer the data from the camera to the computer, because remember I was telling you this is just a shoot and store device, we can apply all of that math in the processing and eliminate a lot of the kind of mystery and the guesswork and the reprocessing of comparing pixels and all of that type of stuff during the rendering point of view. Okay? Now,
so you do that for each individual camera?
Each individual camera.
Based on the fine distinctions.
Fine distinctions of exactly how that camera is manufactured.
Aberration, all that stuff between one side and the other is already done.
It's already done. It's already calculated out. Otherwise, see, we got people laughing because they're like, I've spent hours, weeks, months, or days, trying to figure this stuff out. We're automating it, making it quite simple, and doing it behind the scenes so that you don't have to.
Is it done in the camera or is it done in post?
It's done in post. So once we create that reference file, it's saved in the camera, but when you transfer your data over to your computer where we do rendering, and I'm going to take you through the rendering process here in just a minute. We're also moving over that data file, and that becomes our offset so that we can make everything work.
So you
This-
need to use your software then because it has to read that file correctly.
Exactly right. So you don't have to use our firm, right? There's never
But if you wanna save
definitive.
time, you
If you want to save time and you don't want to, you don't want to turn gray, you use our system. And you can, with third-party software, strip our stuff apart, right? We have a very simple file structure and compile everything. You could take all of those apart and then go and try to do it on your own. Let the experts, let the company that has over 70 patents, who has been spending 16 years doing it, right? Let them help you a little bit. Unless you're just straight up crazy and want to try it. Okay, so once we create virtual reality content, the intent of this device is to play it back in a headset, right? There are other 360-degree cameras in the market. Ricoh, which is the company that I came from, and I launched a product called the Ricoh Theta, which is a 360-degree 2D camera. Nikon's come out with one called the Key Mission. Samsung's got the Gear VR. There's a whole bunch of 360 video cameras out there. The problem is when you put a 360 3D image in a headset, right? It's flat. And when it's flat, because there's no depth, you don't have that offset for the two images, it's uncomfortable. So I know this is not a technical term, but when we talk about the adoption of virtual reality, what we're really talking about is a comfortable feeling that makes you feel like you're actually there and as true to life as possible, right? Now, we had to do a lot of work to figure out how to do that. Here's the first pop quiz of the day. Who knows what the average interpupil distance is for the human eyes?
65 millimeters.
65 is a little on the high side. It's a little 64 and yeah. What's that? Yeah. So when you take VR content and you put it into a headset or a mobile phone that's in a headset and you put it really close to your eyes, there's a level of magnification that happens in that process. So we had to take that into consideration as well. So we actually settled on 58 millimeters as the interpupil distance. And what that allows us to do is not only manage here, but also manage around the corners. And then when you put it into a headset, it actually feels comfortable. And this is what's going to lead to the adoption of virtual reality headsets.
Why were you saying that the image pairs have the appearance of being flat?
No, not image pairs. I'm talking about something like the Ricoh Theta and the others. There's one camera, it's not pairs,
Oh, okay.
right? So
You have pairs here.
yeah, we have pairs. That's right. This particular camera, we use pairs. And we use pairs to overcome that issue with flat video in a headset, okay? Now, we were talking earlier today, there was discussion about 3D TV. The number one reason, and prior to Ricoh, I was at Sony, and we brought this crazy technology to the market as well. The number one reason that 3D TV failed was because of lack of user-generated content. You were restricted to commercially produced content. And all of the engineers who made the technology, not who understand the 3D effect, but understand the technology, said, well, everyone's going to love this. And it's going to be adopted in the United States first because we're going to broadcast football in 3D. Okay? Now, and you guys know all of this a lot better than I do. I am not an expert in your field at all. But I will tell you that the sweet spot of 3D is from 1.5 meters to 15 meters out. Once you get past 20 meters, everything's flat anyway. All right? So what's wrong with trying to broadcast the NFL in 3D? It's a bad idea. The action is too far away. And so there was no commerce opportunity. There was no ad sales to get people to want to buy and to influence the adoption of the TVs, right? Virtual reality runs the risk of the same problem. It runs the risk of being a fad if virtual reality is limited to commercially produced content. Because there's only so many games, there's only so many virtual tours, there's only so much education that can be done. What's that?
Only so many roller coasters.
That's right. Well, I'll get to roller coasters in a minute because you don't want to put them in a headset in a roller coaster.
With football, they could just use hyperstereo to get the effect to create that sense of larger distances away.
I'm sure there's a million different ways to solve it. The problem is you've got Sony broadcast television cameras that are, there's hundreds of them around the nation trying to record. I mean, it just wasn't feasibly possible to make it happen, right? Could technically somebody make it look and fake it and make it seem interesting? Perhaps, right? But the reality is that because nobody was making content and we were relying on commercially produced content, which was expensive and slow to come to the market, and nobody wanted to wear glasses just to watch something stupid that they didn't really care about anyway, so it died on the vine, right? So what we're doing with the Views camera is we're creating an $800 solution that allows anybody to create virtual reality content that can be played back in the headsets. So now the market doesn't have to worry or be concerned with and be reliant on only commercially produced content, right? And as we get tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of cameras, and each one of those is creating hundreds of minutes, thousands of minutes of VR content a day, a week, a month, a year, what we are creating is the world's largest time machine. Because at any point in the future, imagine 15 years from now, when there's a million of these things recording constantly around you, you can go back to any moment of time and relive that as close to as being there as possible. Now, there's one other very important element, because we talk about the level of immersion a lot in our industry. And the more immersed that you feel, the better, the more believable the experience is. And equally important to the visual cues is the audio, right? Because you have to feel like and have an audio field that makes sense like you're there. So the Views camera embedded in here has 4 directional microphones. Each one of those is picking up its hemisphere. We're working with a company called Visisonics. So within our software, we actually also create 3D audio. So you have 3D directional audio together with 360 3D video. So when you put a headset on and you look around, you can tell where sounds are coming from, you can hear things behind you, and then you can go back and relive that experience.
I volunteer to be a test subject. You certainly need them to be tested in the home, right?
There you go. There you go. The last couple things, and then I'm going to go to the software, and you have a hand up. Go ahead, I'll answer your question now.
So the video will be the most YouTube ready, YouTube 360 video ready?
Let's get there in a second after I give you a demo, and then we'll talk about the distribution of VR content, because that's a whole nother hurdle, right? There's a lot of hurdles in this industry. So let's get through, we'll make some stuff, and then I'm going to talk about headsets, and then I'm going to talk about distribution.
Is your headset proprietary to this? That is?
No, what the camera creates is an open industry MPEG-4 file in 4K resolution per eye, and you can pull that into Adobe Premiere or into any editing software. You can edit it, output it, however you want it to do. We know at this stage, any business that is proprietary in nature is going to fail. I would say probably one of the lowlights of my career was I did a lot of work on a product called the Sony Walkman years ago. And Sony went from #1 market share in digital music players with tape players and CD music players. But when they went to the digital music players, Sony also owned a music studio. So they created a proprietary file format called AdTrack3. Now, AdTrack3 was an amazing codec. It was amazing. It sounds much, much better than MP3 and much, much better than what you see in the market today with the Apple devices. But consumers said, no, it's proprietary, closed loop, Sony, you're just trying to take my wallet. It was, so that entire industry, you can watch Sony go from #1 market share to nothing. And they lost the entire business because of a proprietary codec, right? We cannot do that. If we do anything as an industry, as creators, as developers, as technology, if we do anything to slow the adoption of virtual reality and stifle the imagination of the creators, then we're doing ourselves a disservice, right? And the creativity is going to come from training and education, medical, law enforcement, remote imaging, drones. Like, there's so many applications for 3D 360 content, it's mind-boggling. Plus you then put in life's moments, right? Little Billy's birthday, all of these types of things where people today don't think at all about capturing that in virtual reality. But when you do, and when you see it for the first time, you go, I get it. It's like being there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the software here for a second, and then I can answer some more questions because we're going to go from the software to how we distribute it to how you actually view it. Okay? Can I borrow a chair, or can I sit on that? Maybe the chair's better. I'm good. All right, so as I said, for us it's about keeping it very, very simple. We know that there's a lot of data that's happening in here. And I said earlier, it's like 1 gigabyte worth of data for every minute that we record.
What's the maximum frame rate?
So we're recording at 30 frames per second. Now there are, in the back here later, if we have some time, we have an HTC Vive. That actually takes our 30 frames per second and renders it out at 90 frames per second. The human eye wants to see 90 frames per second with a 21 millisecond delay. Okay? So when you move your head, it has to respond within that 21 milliseconds, or else you start to get laggy, you start to feel nauseous, there's all kinds of other things. All right? So your mobile phone doesn't have that frame rate, and it doesn't have that. So you can get an okay experience on a mobile phone. Things like the HTC Vive do a better job. But again, we're in our infancy on all of the headsets, and I'll get back to that in a minute. Just assume for a minute that I recorded something. If I were to plug my camera into here, I automatically get recognized via USB, and I come up with this screen. And the screen actually would say import to render, right, or to open a file that I already have. In this case, I'm going to just browse and go to a file that I already have on this computer. And not that one. So I'm in the imports folder, and all the imports are videos that have been shot. This is kind of what you get. You kind of get a little bit of a thumbnail on things to try to choose from. I'm just going to choose this one just for giggles, and I'm going to say render. Oh, not render, I'm sorry, open. Wrong button. Okay, so now what we've done, oh great. Should have chosen a better one without me sitting in there. Okay, here I am inside of a garage in a place called Nelson, Nevada, and there's not a lot of stuff moving around in here, but I said, you know what, hey, I'll just take a video in here. So I have the camera on a tripod bigger than what this is. This is a monopod that has just little feet. So here the tripod almost disappears. Here you'll actually see the tripod a little bit, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. The first thing that I can do with our software once I get it working is I can just go to trim. Because I am actually starting this up, and then I'm going to go hide around the corner. So now I'm out of the video. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this little bar right here, and I'm going to move it over, and I'm going to say that's my start point. I don't care about me turning it on and off. Now, we also have an app that connects to your mobile phone. So you can use your mobile phone using Wi-Fi connection to start and stop. So you don't have to do that. I just didn't happen to have my phone that day, and whatever. So there's my start point. Now I'm going to move to my end point. And somewhere down here, Jim decides to come back and pick up his camera. There we go. Don't really need me in there, so I'm going to take me out. And we'll just mark that as my endpoint. Very, very simple. Anybody can do it, right? Everybody here think they can do that so far? Okay. No? I heard a no over there. Okay. So I'm going to take you through a couple other things. One would be flip 180 degrees. Now, any ideas why we might want to flip our video 180 degrees?
You might have shot it upside down to begin with. If you're drunk.
That if you might be really drunk, we might have shot it upside down. Here's a case scenario why I might want to fly it upside down. This always becomes an interesting part of the dialogue, so I'm going to stand up and we'll talk about it for a second. One of the greatest demands right now for this technology is to fly this on a drone. Okay? Now, if you remember earlier in my talk, I talked about the fact that if you have distance greater than that 15 to 20 meters out, it's going to compress anyway. So if your idea is to fly a drone high, you're above the horizon and you're getting sweeping vistas and all that kind of stuff, there's other cameras that you could fly that perhaps are lighter and you don't have to deal with the stereo side of things, right? However, You get the right pilot, and you fly one of these cameras close to your subjects. You fly between trees. You go around bridges. You have an entirely different experience that you've never seen before. It's like literally being there. So you can fly these. They fly extremely stable on a number of different aircraft, but when you're done shooting it, you have to flip it back over so that it's protected in the right way. Okay? So I'll be happy to talk to you more about flying these things later if you want. The next one we have here is something called Choose Center. Now, I'm shooting everything. In fact, here's me, and I actually know that the cameras away from the little battery door back here are the primary lenses, so that's the front of the camera. But let's say when I want somebody to put their headset on, after I go back and render this video, I want them to look at that sign, right? What I do in my software is I simply say, I want you to look at this when I put my headset on, right? I want them to look at the back of this old car that's over here. I want them to look out the door, right? You choose what your default point of view will be when somebody puts on that headset. Okay? Animatable. What do you mean?
Start the movie there and have it.
It's a great point. So not in our software, right? So we're about shooting and creating the content. If you want to put in things like an auto rotate, you want to be able to move people around automatically, there are softwares to do that. But you have to remember when we talk about filmmaking and storytelling and virtual reality, it's no longer your job to tell somebody what to look at. It's your job as a filmmaker to be able to create that virtual environment in a way that makes people want to look around, wants to make them to explore. So if I'm looking at something over here and all of a sudden I hear water running in the back and I turn my head, right, and there's an astronaut dropping into a pool doing a training session underwater, that's how virtual reality comes together. So you don't want to necessarily script people in VR. You want people to be able to experience VR. All right, so we've got our Choose Center. The next thing right here is something called the cut field of view. Now let's say for a minute, I don't want this car in the video, right? I can cut it out. And I can say, I want you to only render 223 degrees of my video. Now the rest of it's going to be black, right? But that's okay. So if you have a birthday party and you've got everybody over and you've got the cake and your wife is mortified at the fact that she hadn't had the kitchen clean enough when everyone's over, or that the laundry basket and the ironing board's out or whatever, don't worry, you can mask them out. But there's also another very practical reason from a filmmaking perspective on why you'd want to be able to do this. So let's say for a minute, I'm filming in this room, you are my production crew, and I'm the actors, and we're telling a story up here, right? And we have the craft cart, and we have some food and snacks and lighting and all that kind of stuff, the director, all over there. So what I'll do is I will set this to 180 degrees, and I will render out half of the video, so we have all of this. Then, without moving the camera, all of you will move to this side, and we'll go over here and we'll have all our live action on that side, and we'll do the same thing. We'll mask it out so we only have 180. And then another software, not our software, but like Adobe Premiere, you put those two sides together, and now you've got a complete virtual reality video that is void of any of that technology that was used when you scripted it all out. It's basically like making a plate for you to go back and make your movie out. Okay? So that's something called cut field of view. The next thing here is change cap image. Now, we're in beta right now, we're just finishing up. Cap image is the little, it's a cap, basically, that you put in the bottom of the video. So when you're looking around, instead of seeing your tripod, you see your company logo, you see your name, you see the name of the event. Or if I shot here on this wood floor, I would take a picture of the wood floor, take that JPEG image, put it in to the bottom, and I could fill that hole, right? So my question from you, because there's this big debate going on within our company, do we call it a cap or do we call it a patch? Are we, I hear a patch over here.
Patches for the technological connotations, I think, otherwise.
It's kind of spot removal. It's kind of
See,
spot
I think
removal.
the cap is being on top. I call it an anchor.
Okay. Oh,
Or a
geez.
footer, yeah. I mean, in other words, I think the cap is.
Well, none of you are helping me very much because you see here we say top and bottom, or top and bottom. Because when you patch it, you may want to hide something that's the top. You might want to hold something at the bottom. You might want to do both. So, all right. So you are no help. But anyway, and then we can change the size of it, right? So right now it's at 10%. If I really wanted to block a lot, I could block a lot that way, or I could go very small or eliminate it altogether, right? So for me, if you have that little monopod like that, a 4% cap at the bottom is enough to cover up that little monopod, and it all hides. All right?
Kind of like a hatch for a hidden door.
Exactly, right? Okay. And then the last thing here is we get into some more of the technical stuff, refined stitching. Truth is, you don't have to touch this if you don't want to. You could just push render right now, and it will render it out. But I'm going to show you, and this is not a great example because I don't have things moving around in here, but if there were stitch errors in here, I would just choose some frames where there are stitch issues, and I would add that frame to the file to have them mark it as one that I want to work on. And what happens is, you see that little vertical line over here that was added? It marks where I've put in these corrections. And what the software is doing is it's using the interpupil distance here to calculate out where the stitch line is in space and optimize for that stitch line so that we can eliminate stitch lines based on distance. Okay? And again, the only reason we can do that is we have all of the geometry of the camera all figured out. A couple other things in here, blending levels. This is when we have 8 cameras. There's no surprise. We have 8 cameras. They are overlapping. In fact, we use 4 of them to create a 4K video for your left eye. So we start with 8 megapixels worth of data. We're using 4 megapixels of that with 4K. So there's a fair amount of overlap, and this is how we blend them to make sure that it looks smooth. And then color correction is another one you can hit. There's just a simple little color correction and an advanced color correction. Again, user definable. You can decide what you want to do with it. In this case, I'm just going to say none. And then I'm going to say render. Okay? Oh, I'll go back and render it again here in a second. So this video is about a minute long. It's going to take us usually about a minute to render a minute. I have 2 applications open over here because I was going to do a demo later. One is the Steam, which is a gaming engine, and the other is the VR engine with for Oculus, or not Oculus, I'm sorry, HTC Vive. And as a result of that, it's eating up some of my stuff. So it's taken me a little more than a minute to do a minute worth of video. So unlike we heard earlier today that we have to go out and buy additional computing power, I'm working on a relatively simple laptop. I mean, it's still a gaming laptop, and it has a nice, beautiful rainbow keyboard, which I'm sure makes it that much faster. But anyway, this is a i7 quad core. But what's that? Not during recording. You can do it after by using that select field of view. But no, the camera's going to capture everything, right? Its eyes are always on. I'm not sure why it says I have errors, largely because I'm in front of a group and having a conversation. But
Do you have examples that where the subject matter is, people are close up, within the range where it's various
I do, and I'm going to show you a lot of that stuff in the back there.
Great.
What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go in and open up that file I just rendered. And then I'm going to talk about the file format. Okay, I see why it says it has errors. There's something funky with this camera. You see there's a little bit of a shade difference left and right on here. So this was actually shot with a different camera, and I have new software in here, so it's a little bit funky. But anyway, neither here nor there. What you're actually looking at here is 180-degree field of view. Any idea why we call it 360 by 180 instead of 360 by 360? This is the huge debate in the industry right now. Why is virtual reality not 360 by 360? Pretty good. I mean, you could zoom out. You could do something called Little Planet, and you can see all 360. But here's the answer, okay? I can turn like this 360 degrees. I can look up 90, and I can look down 90. So the designation is 180-degree field of view this way, and then 360 this way. That's why it's 360 by 180. Okay? There you go. There's your lesson for the day. The camera will allow you to put it out into standard 4K video format, which is 3840 by 2160 pixels. We also do Cinema 4K, which is 4096 by 2160, which gives you a wider piece that doesn't fit across broadcast television, but it does do a nice job of giving us some additional pixels to do it. When you are viewing this field of view, your up and down is stretched, right? Because I'm looking at this much of the image and I'm stretching it all the way across my frames. So it's kind of hard to see, but it gets very distorted on the ends when you see these. So you actually are losing some data. There's some other technology, primarily something called cube mapping, which allows you to box these things up differently so that you don't have that issue. But anyway, this is a standard MPEG file. You can put it into any editing software, edit it out, render it, put titles, do all that kind of stuff. It's just, if you put titles in it, you got to remember you're in stereo. So you either got to use a third-party app to help you know that you're aligning them correctly, or you got to be really good at it. Otherwise, you put it on, your titles look terrible, because obviously you have to do for one side is what you do on the other. Okay? A rendered out video is about 330 megabytes for every 1 minute of video. So we started with the raw data at 1 gigabyte a minute. We're finishing with about 330 megabytes per minute. How that gets played back, we had talked earlier about YouTube and what have you. YouTube, Facebook, there used to be a company called Vrideo, which has gone out of business. But they are now allowing you to upload 360 content, but also 3D content. And there's a little button that you push to get the two hemispheres left and right. So you put it into a headset, it actually looks proper. Both YouTube and Facebook compress the videos to get them out. So your image quality is really dependent on not only your connection, but the playback device that you have. We create more data than today's playback devices can play back at. Right? So we're exceeding the resolving power of the devices. The headsets need to get better. They will get better. The way I like to explain this to people is today, who remembers the movie Wall Street with Gordon Gekko, the original one, not the remake? Okay. Gordon Gekko took this phone, was this big like a brick with an antenna on it, and he went onto a beach and he made a phone call. And millions of people watching the movie went, oh my God, he just made a phone call without a wire, right? That's the stage we are right now with headsets. And what we're going to see is they're going to get exponentially lighter, more powerful, higher resolving power, blah, 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 blah. The truth is, if you really want to do it true to life, you need 6 megapixels per eye at 90 frames per second. That's like the holy grail. Now, there's a whole lot of gaps to fill it between now and then, and quite frankly, the experiences that you see now are pretty dang good. If you put on a headset and you see that thing, we refer to it as a screen door effect, right? It looks like the pixels. You're actually not looking at the pixels of the video, you're looking at the pixels of the phone. Because when you put on a headset, and in fact, if you just look at a headset, they have magnifying glasses in it, and what you're doing is you're actually magnifying and looking at that screen very close. And you can go get a magnifying glass and look at your screen and go, oh yeah, I see all those little pixels. It's exactly what you're seeing with your eyes. It's all going to change. Is it 1 year, 18 months? I've heard of 6K stuff that's coming down. I've heard of, anyway, the playback piece of it's going to get a lot easier. What we're doing with Human Eyes and the Views camera is for $800, empowering just about anybody to be able to start to learn how to tell stories in virtual reality video. And that's my story, sticking with it. I do have an HTC Vive back there that I can plug in and you can see it. I can answer questions, I can do whatever. I don't know where we are on time.
Keep going, we're good,
We're good?
we're good.
Okay, let's start up front.
I don't think I've ever seen anything like virtual reality like you're talking about. You keep saying telling stories. Are there any that exist now where they've actually told a quote story?
Yes.
Unquote?
Yes. I think the probably most interesting one, if you have access to a headset, even Google Cardboard or something like this, right? So there's cheap ways to get into it as well. There is a short series that was put together. It's called Invisible. Now, we didn't film it. It was actually filmed by another camera that cost $250,000. So, but people look at it and they go, well, your video is just as good, if not better, than theirs at $250,000. So take a look at it. But what Invisible is, very interesting story. So Invisible was sponsored by Lexus, car manufacturer. There's not a single car in it. But Lexus was really smart. They knew that if they could engage with a customer and have them come back and watch this series of 8, I think it's either 8 or 9 now, of these shorts, and the shorts are 7 to 10 minutes long, and each one of those stories builds on the other. It's like watching an episode of a show, all shot in 360, all shot in 3D VR with sound. And you can get a glimpse of what it's like and how powerful the medium is when people start telling the story in virtual reality. And I don't want to give away too many secrets, but camera placement is critical to telling that story. This camera here is now just maybe, 5'8" or something, which is almost about what the average person is. I'm taller than that, so when I look at this video, I feel like I'm doing this, right? It doesn't feel natural to me because the camera's lower than me. If I mount the camera down here, now I have a child's perspective, right? And so in Invisible, and I think it's the second episode of the first, and here's the spoiler alert if you don't want to hear it. The camera is down on the floor. And there's all this weird sound effects, and you're like, why am I on the floor? It's really unnerving. It's very uncomfortable to be on the floor. You're like, this is wrong. And you turn your head, and you're actually right next to a pool of blood of the victim who is also on the floor with you. And you talk about like this emotional, powerful reaction to you to make you go, A, I didn't expect it. B, it's really uncomfortable and unnerving. But at the same time, it makes you go, I can only imagine what the power of this medium is as professional storytellers and creators and the brilliant people. It's not me. I'm a technology person. I'm a product guy. I'm not the creative type. But when you see it, and when you see more and more people creating this very powerful content, we will change lives. And I'm not trying to say that to be silly, but we will change people's lives with the ability to tell a story in virtual reality. And no longer does it take everybody to do it. You can put this together and send it off, and Grandpa can watch it on the other side of the world and be able to live that experience. It's really powerful. Yes?
So is this still targeted to be shipping in late March?
So we are scheduled to ship March 7th is our first ship date. We are fulfilling orders based on the order that they came in. So if you have an order in the system, we have a lot of back orders. I think a lot of them are going to
At this point, is it better to order directly from your company or to try to find a store that might have?
Best to order directly
No,
from
just
us.
to get one quickly. Should I?
Yeah, best to order directly from us.
And do we get we offer a discount to the members, you think?
You know, I might be able to do that. I will take I will take the action item on my side. That's a great question.
There we go.
I got to check with my engineering team to see if we can put together a code that we can put out to the members, and you can send it out via email or something like that.
We're going to keep moving because, everyone's going to want a chance to look at that.
Yeah.
And maybe you could just ask the questions.
Well, while we're doing it? Yeah.
Go ahead, Max. Max, we got to let go.
Yeah, I have one question about the actual stereo, because you've got your cameras obviously facing, like there's a stereo view this way, and then the next one is 90 degrees this way.
Yep.
And I'm just sort of wondering, like, if I'm looking 45 degrees off,
Yep.
I'm kind of in between two stereo views. So
You
how
are.
does that
You are.
work?
So there's two things. That's a great question. There's two things to be aware of. There are danger points with the stitch. So you want to know that your 45's off on this, where you have the greatest overlap and you're moving piece to piece. You do run the risk of having stitch lines. And if you have an actor walk through that stitch line and stuff like that, you may have a glitch. You have to go back and correct it, those types of things. Okay?
So if you were,
That's number
if you
one.
were shooting, you would kind of strategically.
That's right. You would strategically place it. So
Yeah.
you probably didn't notice, but the way I placed this camera here, it's a little bit of an angle because I wanted to make sure that I didn't end up in a stitch line. I don't care so much that there's a stitch line right here, right? So
If you
That-
had
those kinds of
6
things when you do
cameras
it.
Instead of 4, right, or one
6
more,
cameras harder.
5, I know, but if you had 5, you could maybe avoid that issue.
You got other issues when you go there. Then you get into a size issue and everything else. So here's the other little piece.
Okay.
We then start to use digital voodoo, right? Because to your point, when you get off axis and you get out of that sweet spot, what starts to happen? Because you're moving from this as a left eye or right eye to this as a right eye. So we need to move, and we're going across that lens.
Right.
And so there's a digital voodoo, so we know exactly what part of this lens needs to align with the part of this lens,
Okay.
right? In order to maintain that distance. So the geometry on this thing, although it looks square and everything else, a lot of work went into getting that to go right.
Well, I'll say one thing. If the human race can somehow get past when pornography starts showing up on this,
What do you mean start?
we have a chance. If we can somehow, I don't know if we're going to get over that hill. I'm not sure. But once that begins, if we can get past that, we may make it to the stars eventually, I'm thinking.
There you go. There you go. I'm going to set up back there, and anybody who wants to put a headset on can, and I don't want to disrupt your flow or
Oh, no,
whatever,
no,
but
perfect. That was great.
Okay.
That was not a bad night, right? That was great, man. Thank you.